Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan Grech, and today I'm going to talk all about communications for the international overlander. So whether that's internet access, whether it's talking on radios, or whether it's satellite communications, I'll get into all three of those in this video. If you're interested, stick around. Let's get into the details. So the first topic is internet access once you start going global. And on my first trip from Alaska to Argentina, I just relied on Wi-Fi, and that worked well enough. There were often times where I would go a week or even two without internet access, but back then, I didn't really care. I'd never had a cell phone with data, and that was enough. The Wi-Fi was usually fast enough for me to upload photos, but it was nothing spectacular. But these days, we all have different requirements. Most of us are used to being connected all of the time. So the best way to be connected now, there's no doubt about it, it's using your cell phone and using the local cellular networks of each country that you pass through. And there are a few things like Google Fi is a project where you can get data and get access in many countries in the world just by having the one plan that you have all the time. You don't switch for each country. That's kind of nice because you get to keep your phone number and it makes it all simple. There are reports of people using it on the Pan American Highway and it works well enough, but in my experience, I just don't think it has the coverage necessary. It's kind of like a capital city thing. And certainly if you go more remote, if you're into wild parts of Africa or Central Asia, Google Fi just isn't going to work at all. So it's an option, I guess, but I don't think it's a very good option. So what does that leave you with? That leaves you with the best option that basically every overlander does, and that is getting a new SIM card in every country. So that means every time you cross the border, you're going to go and buy a SIM card and a cell phone plan from the local cell phone carrier. And every country has lots of them, even the Congo, even Angola. They have lots of different brands. You might have heard of them. MTN, Tigo, Orange. These are all over the world. And you'll pretty quickly know which ones are in which country because they spend a lot of money on advertising, billboards and flyers and even people walking around. So the reason to get a SIM card in every country is because then you're going to get the best coverage. That carrier has coverage in that country. And if you're wondering how good it is, what I found in Africa is that every town big enough to have a gas station definitely has 2G cell coverage and most likely has 3G coverage. And it was fast. I uploaded most of my YouTube videos, all of my high-def photos through those cellular networks, no problem at all. If you're wondering how much it costs, it's way cheaper than you're thinking. SIM cards are usually about 50 cents or $1, so it's insignificant. And the data itself varied from about $1 a gigabyte. Usually it was about $2 a gigabyte. One or two countries it was maybe $4 a gigabyte. So it's really cheap. And the way they do it is it's all just prepaid. So when you go to get your SIM card, you can just get a prepaid chunk and say, I'll just buy 10 gigabytes right now, and spend $15. And that's going to last you the month or two that you're in the country. One downside to doing this is that you will get a new phone number in each and every country. So it's not like you can tell your friends and family one number and they can just call you all the time. But really, who makes regular phone calls anymore anyway? Chances are you're going to be calling on WhatsApp or just messaging or use some sort of data service anyway. So the underlying phone number, as far as I'm concerned, is basically irrelevant. A quick tip on this, when you're actually crossing an international border, as well as the guys that are going to try and shepherd you across and get paid for that, there are also going to be guys there trying to sell you cell phone SIM cards, data plans for those carriers I just talked about. And you could buy one from them and it probably will work, but it probably will only work for a day or two. Most of the carriers, they have rules in place where you can get one of these kind of instantaneous cards, but then you have to do some sort of complicated registration. And who even knows what that is? Who even knows what language it's going to be in? So my advice is never buy one from the guys at the border. Instead, on your first or second day in a country, keep your eyes out. When you're in the first town, you're going to see a store for one of the cell phone carriers. And again, these stores are really common because cell phone carriers are the ones that make all of the money. go actually into the store, take your phone with you, and just say, I'd like to buy a SIM card, please. They will do everything for you. Chances are they want a photocopy of your passport, you pay your $10 for the prepaid data. They're gonna fill in all the paperwork, they're gonna register on the network. They'll even put the SIM in your phone for you, and if any settings have to be changed or whatever, they'll do that for you. So it all works, it's all perfect, and by the time you leave the store, you'll have data on your phone, and then you can just hotspot it off to your laptop or whatever you want. So definitely my advice is buy a real one from the actual store. But then later on, if you're in the country for a while, you can always just buy top-ups from people on the side of the road. Usually they're like a little scratchy card. Sometimes, you just dial it in with those kind of star hash number combinations. But in any case, the top-ups are no problem because you've already registered on the network. It's just that initial registration. Go into the store, get that done, and you're gonna have data in the whole country. And if you're wondering how common and how easy this is, I went to 35 countries in Africa, and I probably bought SIM cards from 32 or 33 of them. There really was only a couple of countries I didn't get one, and that was, for example, Nigeria, where I just drove across in a week and a half, so I decided I didn't need one. But certainly every country in the world, you can buy a local SIM and the data's quite cheap and it works really well. That, in my experience, talking to overlanders around the world, is the best way to get yourself online. Next topic is radio communications. In Australia called CB radios. In the US, people use UHF or just those handheld radios. And people always ask what I use. And the answer is I don't use anything at all because 9 times out of 10, there's nobody to talk to anyway. So in all the countries I've ever been in Latin America, in Africa, nobody else has a CB radio. So even if you've got one, there's not going to be anyone to talk to. Furthermore, in quite a few countries, they're actually illegal and they're strictly enforced. Morocco is a great example. So lots of countries, they're not actually run by their military, but they still have a very strong military presence. And the military is quite strict about rules and they don't want civilians to have things like radios. So if you were to have one in Morocco, that's a really bad idea. You don't want them to see it with the antenna. You don't want them to see it inside the vehicle. So my advice, especially for an Africa trip, you simply don't need one. It's not something to consider. Obviously, Australia, they are very common. All the truck drivers have them. Nearly all the four-wheel drivers have them. So they're a really good idea when you're out remote. You can talk to people, within whatever distance of you and try to get information about the road or the weather or whatever. And obviously, if you're a couple of vehicles in convoy, I know lots of Americans like to have radios and it's this constant chatter thing. I personally have never had one. Even when I was convoying with my German friends in Africa, we never felt the need to have a radio. I sort of find it more fun not to have one. It's a bit more adventurous to sort of use hand signals and have to pull up next to each other at times to talk, or to just let the adventure roll on and say, I'm going to head down this track, I won't turn off, catch up to me when you catch up to me. We don't really need a radio to stay in immediate contact at all times. So as far as CB radio goes, they're not very common for international overlanding. And then the final topic that I'd like to cover today is satellite communications, and let's start with satellite phones. And a satellite phone sounds like a really great idea. You're going remote, you can use it in case of emergencies. But what I say about satellite phones is it comes down to the Ghostbusters problem, and that is, who are you going to call? So let's say when I was in Mali, I don't know, something went wrong with the Jeep or I got sick or something. The question is, who are you going to call that can actually help? If you call people back home, your friends or your family, chances are it's the middle of the night, so that's terribly inconvenient for them. And they are literally on the other side of the world. They can't send you any parts. They can't call the embassy and get the embassy to do something. And chances are they can't really give you much medical help because you're not going to have supplies with you that outstretch the kind of training that you already have. If you've done a basic first aid course, you have basic first aid supplies with you. But if you end up calling magically a doctor on the other side of the world, the doctor's going to say, yeah, get out your scalpel and do blood. And you say, oh, I don't have a scalpel because I'm not really trained to use one. So a satellite phone is kind of a curious thing. On that same idea, people say, what if you called your embassy? Surely they would help. Well, I hate to break it to you, they are not going to help. If you call your embassy when you're in Mali or you're in Nigeria or you're in Congo, they're going to say, yeah, we exist to help you because you're a citizen of our country. Come into the embassy, we'll help you renew your passport, we'll help you talk to the local government, we'll help you if you lost your passport, we will help you if you come to the embassy. So if you call them up and you say, oh yeah, I'm in the middle of nowhere and I broke down, I need you guys to help me, they're going to say, we don't have a vehicle to do that. We can't just drive out into the middle of nowhere and help some stranded guy. Well, like, how are we going to do that? Where do we get a vehicle? Where do we get gas? That's not why we exist. So it's a real misnomer that like your embassy is going to come and rescue you if you're in trouble. Embassies just exist for you to go to them and they can help you with like paperwork type problems. So in a funny sense, I've never really thought that a satellite phone is actually that useful. And I personally have never carried one, and I don't think I ever will. The other type of satellite communication is something like a spot or an inReach or one of those emergency devices. And certainly, if you're in North America, if you're in Europe or Australia, yeah, I think they're a really great idea. If you do get stranded super, super remote, you can hit that emergency button and chances are a helicopter is going to show up, within the next 48 hours or something like that. You might have to pay for it, but if it saves your life, it's probably worth it. But again, when it comes to Africa, when it comes to Latin America, it doesn't work like that. Surprise, surprise, Mali does not have search and rescue. Neither does Nigeria, neither does Zambia, neither do lots of countries. And in fact, I met a couple who had hit their emergency beacon button while they were in Zambia. It's a long story and they were being silly and some park guards were giving them a hard time, and so they hit the actual send me a helicopter button. And you know what happened? Absolutely nothing happened. No helicopter came because Zambia doesn't have helicopters just waiting around to rescue people. They don't even have four-wheel drives waiting around to rescue people. It doesn't work like that. So if a spot or an inReach isn't very good, then I guess the final type of satellite communications are these new ones where like they pair with your cell phone and you're able to send text messages, maybe you're able to post to Facebook, stuff like that. And again, maybe it's helpful because you can get some two-way communication going, but in reality, if you're driving through Nigeria, who's in Nigeria that you're going to be able to text that's actually going to help you? Yeah, you could send a text message back to your family at home, and they could even say, okay, we'll order you some parts, but I mean, you would have been able to do that next time you got on the internet anyway. So you're probably just gonna save yourself 12 or 24 hours or something, which in the grand scheme of things is really not that significant. So again, these kind of satellite communication devices, if you're in the developed world, yes, I think they're a really great idea, but for going international, they're actually not that useful. Maybe they give you peace of mind. Maybe it's nice you can leave the tracking feature turned on so your family can follow you and, make sure you're still alive. But in terms of actually getting help, they're not really going to help that much. So then the final thing is people say, then who is going to help you, Dan? What was your backup plan? What are you going to do if you get yourself in trouble? And I learned really quickly in both Latin America and Africa, the people that are going to help you, they're not on the other side of the world at the end of a satellite phone. They're not in your embassy on the end of a satellite phone or, an inReach text message. They are the people that are near you. So they're walking distance or, maybe a few days walking distance, but they're the people in the villages that you drove through. They're the guys driving the transport trucks and the families on overloaded motorbikes. Those people are the ones that will help you. And they will because they're extremely used to it because they're always helping each other. When I ran out of gas in Argentina and in Zambia, when I rolled the Jeep in Uganda, when we got stuck in the mud in the Congo, all of those times, locals spring into action and they help. And they get it because they're always helping each other, and sometimes I helped them and sometimes they helped me. And so in that regard, everybody's working together. So my backup plan when I'm going global around the world isn't some high-tech satellite phone and to call someone on the other side of the world. My plan is to bump into locals and shake hands and say hello and be friendly and know that they're relying on me to pull them out of the mud, and I'm going to rely on them to pull me out of the mud or give me a ride into whatever town so I can get some internet or something like that. So in a funny sense, when you go to less developed parts of the world, it's perfectly okay to rely on less developed means of communication and problem solving. You end up solving your problems exactly like our grandparents and great-great-grandparents did, just by talking to locals and putting your heads together and working together as a team. I hope that information's useful, and I hope it answers a bunch of the questions that people always have about how do you communicate once you take your overlanding international. Like so many things in overlanding, it does take a little bit of preparation and a bit of planning, but it also is very achievable and you can make it work if you plan ahead and you're just a little bit organized. So once again, a big thanks to my supporters on Patreon. These guys are about to start getting details of my next trip. I'm also now offering vehicle and trip consulting to people who support me on Patreon. So if you'd like to have a video call with me and chat about your vehicle needs or an international trip that you have in mind, that's something I now offer supporters on Patreon. So there's a link down in the description and check out all of that. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.